At the age of 20, I learned the value of being open-minded to other people. I always knew that it was important, but I only began to realize why after something that happened. I was on my year abroad in Madrid, and I had entered a conversation with this girl. She was trying to justify her lack of interaction with foreigners like myself. I was getting frustrated by this conversation because I didn't understand why somebody wanted to do that. And she looked at me, quite smugly, and she said something that I'll never forget. She said, "You are a bad investment." Now, I just want to get an initial show of hands here. Raise your hand if you've ever felt rejected for something that you can't control. Awesome. You guys know how I felt. Great. For those who didn't raise their hands, meet me after lunch and tell me your secrets. So in this case, not only was my background, my personality, or my interests completely irrelevant, but I was being compared to something that I thought had inherently nothing to do with the value of friendship. Apparently, connections worth having were all to do with timing, and my temporality made me unapproachable to many people that year. They always say that you should trust the timing of your life, and to a great extent, I do believe that. But what happens when you try in front of other people that you don't know, and the answer you get is wrong place, wrong time, sorry? And I wasn't the only recipient of this behavior. It's a mentality of how people are increasingly precious with the time they choose to spend with other people, despite us living in an interconnected and globalized world. I felt profoundly out of place. And everyone wants to feel in place, connected to people, or something that they can call home, right? But it's not just any connection that we seek. It's the kind that slows down time when we bond with someone that we just met. It's those moments, those timeless moments that we associate with the meaningful relationships in our lives. An example for me is when I go home. When I go home and we finish dinner, I wash the dishes with my dad. And we're a small family. We're only 3 of us. It takes us about 3 hours to do the dishes. Am I right, Dad? And it's because we're too busy catching up. And in that moment, there is no other place I'd rather be. I feel in place, any place. So can we achieve this regardless of timing? Let's think about it. The question of feeling in place is one that's asked constantly in architectural dialogue. Okay, we always think about, when you study architecture, you always have to have a reason for why you choose to design something. You know, you question your form, you question your functions, you question the detail of a building, and you always need to have a list of reasons to explain why you chose to do this. Why is the corridor so narrow? Why is the ceiling so high? Is the ceiling high because the corridor is narrow? Is the corridor narrow because the ceiling is high? It goes on and on and on it goes until you're almost dizzy with everything you have to invent. So we learn to justify these decisions, like the girl was doing in Madrid. But oftentimes, our approach narrows our perspective, and we could become frustrated by the outcomes. The interesting thing about architecture is this conflict you have between design and user experience. This image appears many times during our education. In fact, I think I saw it in every city I was studying. Everyone really likes it. And what it is, basically, is what you think isn't always what's gonna happen, no matter how much you think it through. What actually unravels or actually unfolds could be completely different, no matter how well you plan things. Architects are a little bit neurotic, and we like to plan everything, so this is frustrating. There's almost this sort of dissonance, there's a disconnect between what's actually happening and what you really, really want to happen. And I think it's because, at the end of the day, people are unpredictable. You can't anticipate their feelings or their emotions. But one thing I found that's really important, that really struck me, is when I was reading a magazine about a month ago, and I found this line, and I thought, man, if I could be any line in a magazine, if something could exemplify what I am as a person, it's this. The emotional side of creativity is just as important as the outcomes it produces. They're not two different things, they're one and the same. But sometimes we get frustrated when we feel out of place creatively and emotionally. There's a disconnect, there's a dissonance. So what is this disconnect? The architect Bernard Tschumi describes this sort of gap that you have, this sort of frustration, this paradox, as something that's between a pyramid and a labyrinth. It's a weird example, but bear with me right now. I'll try and do him justice. Let's start with the pyramid. Now, the pyramid represents the textbook ideals behind design, the stuff that's been thought up over thousands of years by tons of smart people that I study. It's the things that are pure and beautiful, but when you look to the pyramid for an interaction, you don't know where to start. How do I enter it? What do I do with it? Yeah, it looks really pretty, but I don't know how to respond to something that's not intuitive. It's almost like, and this feeling happens to me quite a lot, when you're walking through an art gallery and you're looking at all the paintings and you don't really know what they mean. And you paid money for this, so what's going on? No, this happens a lot. You don't quite get what it means because there's a gap between what you're seeing and the idea or the concept of what's there in front of you. And this frustrates us because we don't know what to do. The labyrinth, on the other hand, is a connector. It's intuitive. It's the street smarts behind learning. You twist and you turn, taking left after right after left, learning from your mistakes. It's the emotional, the raw, the intuitive, the real part of learning. When you fail and you get up again and you get lost and you get up again and you get lost again, and it goes on and on. I often feel that my degree feels like I'm walking through a labyrinth. Imagine you're in a maze, surrounded by buildings, people, experiences, trying to understand what it all means and how we fit in. And the thing about walking through a labyrinth is that it's a lonely experience. You never really imagine you're going through it with your friends or your family. It's an interesting experience because, food for thought, when beautiful pictures of new architectural projects come out in magazines or in the newspaper, they're often photographed without anyone in them at all. Weird, right? There's a dissonance. And what I found is that when you compare it to people, you get an interesting comparison as well. So think about this. In terms of the pyramid, it's almost like you really, really liking the idea of someone, but when they are actually in front of you, you don't actually enjoy spending time with them, which is awkward. And when it comes to the labyrinth, you really, really, really like spending time with this person. You enjoy the interactions that you have, but you don't want to take things to another level. Either way, it's awkward. And my face is really easy to read, so it is all over my face. Can we get something in between? Architecture is both concepts and experience. It's never one or the other. It has to be a bit of both in order to work, in order to be successful. In the movie Inception, they hire an architecture student to design the dream worlds. Have you guys seen Inception? Yeah? And what this person does is that she organizes this map and the structure of the entire dream so that all the characters can complete their mission. But she leaves one thing out. You can only plan something to a certain extent, but it's up to the other people to fill it with their ideas and their presence to make things interesting. That way you'll never be bored. I realized I was beginning to find parallels in my discipline and in my daily life. So false turn after false turn in my labyrinth in Madrid, where I was lost, felt like meeting person after person after person until you meet that one person. When talking to them feels like the easiest thing in the world. And suddenly that feeling was back again. There was no place else I'd rather be. I felt in place but any place. Now, great design is communication, but good design also gets the message across, but it engages in conversation. This conversation I was having was not only with other people, but it was with myself. It was about how I could open myself to this conversation. And I saw this more than ever through maintaining a sketchbook. Now, a sketchbook is static, but what it does to somebody that controls it is that it brings time to a standstill. It was my way of engaging with the environment as I tried to make a connection to people or places, especially when I felt really out of place and really lonely. And what I found is that the more I kept myself open, the more I kept myself receptive to the environment, the more I got out of it, the more I liked my ideas, the more I liked my design. And in turn, the more I kept myself open to people, the more I got out of it, and the more inspired I felt. And when it comes to people, my mom told me something over Christmas that really stuck with me. She said, "Sabrina, listen to me. There's one thing I want you to know. When I hear that people are difficult, I get fascinated." I had no idea why she would do that. And only now I'm beginning to understand what she meant. And I can't help thinking of two people I met towards the end of my year abroad in Madrid. The first was a girl from Brazil. We met at a cafe. And she didn't speak any English. I didn't speak any Portuguese. So in our broken Spanish, because that was difficult, but it was okay, we could overcome that. In our broken Spanish, we sat down and tried to exchange our lives together. I found out that she, like me, had spent the first 18 years of her life in one place. I found out that she was close to her family, close to her friends, and it was her first time abroad, just like me, even though she had literally spent her life on the other end of the world. And at the end of our conversation, which was the whole day, because you couldn't even feel how long it was that we'd been talking, the only thing that I could say to this person that I just met was, "Thank you. Thank you for sharing. And I'm so glad I met you." About 3 weeks later, I was at a train station. I was traveling alone, and I came across a boy my age. Again, the situation was difficult. He spoke no English, but it was okay. I had a good handle of Spanish at this point, so I engaged in conversation, and we got to talking. We talked about what he was doing here, what brought him to this place. We exchanged stories, and something surprising happened. This time it was him that turned around and said to me, "Wow, thank you for sharing. You're the only one in this station in the middle of nowhere, but thank you for sharing that part of your life with me." And suddenly, because we'd been speaking for so long, he had to catch his train, so he was running. He got his stuff, and he was running down the station. And before he left, he turned around, and he said to me, "Triunfa," and then he kept going. Now, I didn't know what that word meant. So the first thing I did was go home and look it up. And triunfar means many things in Spanish. It means to win. It means to triumph. But in his case, it means, "I wish you success." The fact that he was wishing me well based on this one conversation touched me deeply. And it was a complete opposite to conversations I'd had at the beginning of my year. In these non-places of a cafe and a train station, I felt in place, any place. A design can only be really improved if you expose yourself to criticism. And in turn, you can only forge those meaningful connections unless you keep yourself open to them. There's always room for a perspective to grow. Even though you think you have the full picture, you'll be surprised. There could be one that's bigger and beautiful and more colorful than you can even imagine, even with the same idea as a starting point. Myself and my architecture are always a work under construction. And just like there's no glass ceiling to an idea, there's no limit to the meaningful connections you can make in your life. They're infinite. And in terms of investment, you'll always be rich. What I want to share today is that it's your creativity and your openness that grounds you. It's that makes you feel in place, no matter where you are. And maybe one day, we can all feel in place, any place. Thank you.